Alright, so we start with a large juice container. This is stained from the cranberry juice in it. It has been cleaned. And you're going to want to cut this disc out. Now, in this case, I'm going to cut a little bit further into this area so that we have something to trim back to. And I'll be right back. And trimmed. Now, this edge, go ahead and take a decent nail file and just kind of clean that up. Get all your rough edges off. Nice and simple. Alright. And that is your main disc. Now, the next part you're going to need is part of a mechanical pencil. So, the part we're looking for is this little piece that comes part way in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut right about here because we only need so much. Okay, there's that. And then next we need only a little bit of this, and then we're also going to want a barbecue skewer. So I'm going to put a drop of super glue right in this cup and pull it back in. Now we only want about 1/4 inch, give or take. About like so. And then the final set. And now that is good to go in there. Now just get some snips or razor knife and cut right there. I'm just going to use these heavy duty craft scissors. Just go snip. And that's it. And then we're going to get that handy dandy nail file and just kind of make sure that that's more or less snug and level there. Okay. Now, here's where we used an old school crafting technique where we super glue this in place to that disc right in the center there, and then we give a little bit of extra support on that with some baking soda. I'm going to do that. I'll be right back. There it is. A little bit of super glue and baking soda, and that gets you a nice strong bond there. Now we need the ribs to support this in place. I'm going to use Dental picks. You can bag of these for a couple bucks. They're dirt cheap. Really only use these for crafting. A pair of snips. Now you need about 1 inch. I have one already trimmed here, and one way you can make sure you're getting them all lined up is go ahead and hold it snug so that it's in the exact profile, right? And trim it. Just like that. Now you're going to need 8 of these, and I already have the rest of them cut. So now we go in and one at a time we glue them in place as supports. Now there's 2 angles on here. I like to do this first angle, not this little short one, but this first angle. So you want to put glue there and glue here on the bottom and glue it like so. And then I'm going to start by going in between these bumps. I will do that. Be right back. Okay, this bottle, having already had a wonderful deep detail here, only really needed 6. The first one I did didn't have such a deep detail, so that I ended up not needing to. So the next thing on the detail is we take some food packaging, cardboard. This is from a pizza. And you're going to need a 3-inch disc. So for that, we're going to go ahead and take a standard old school like compass and just draw out a disc here and cut it out. Now we're going to need to come in about a ½ inch or so and then cut that one more time so we have a ring. Okay, so I've got this little ring, and then look at the prototype. So we're going to be doing these pieces next. So you need to cut a couple of quarters and a couple of long pieces there. So we're just going to go ahead and mark a few of those here. So we're going to do, about that distance here. And then we're going to use this line. We're going to go just a little bit further, like maybe here. And so we're going to cut like that and like that. Save this. We'll come back to this in a minute. Now, the next part for that detail is I happen to have some round embroidery canvas, but this might be harder to find. You might find that to be too expensive. So instead, we're going to use the regular sheet kind. I have a bigger sheet than this. It's just an example. About $1 for more than you're going to need for this project. So we're going to go ahead and glue that to this. And two things about this. First off, you're going to want to sand this, or use your nail file, and you're going to want to sand that just to kind of rough up that edge so there's something for the glue to grab. And then after that, we're going to use super glue. So we're going to just go ahead and get this first part prepped. Okay, we're going to need a few, so I made up a couple. Next, we're going to go ahead and check what's left of the ring here, and you're going to trim up a couple more pieces to match. If you don't have enough left of this, go ahead and trim up some pieces that are going to be from the other cardboard piece. And so we're just going to go ahead and get them in here, line it all up, and get you a good piece. And then what we do here is take this piece, and you want to come in, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch, give or take, all the way around. And once you've drawn that out there, get in there with the X-Acto blade, take your time, and cut this out. Once you've done that, you're going to have a frame. You then glue the frame over that, so you have a nice border around your grid texture. I'm going to do one to show you. I'll be right back. There you go. Nice little frame, nice little detail. So I'm going to do this to the other pieces. This one that is longer, I'm going to have one little long piece in the center, so it has two little frames. Alright, so we have the little grid pieces made up here. So now we need to figure out where we want them positioned on this. Now you do want to leave a little bit of a spot on the bottom because you're going to have the mounting area that holds the whole thing up, this little brick thing. So we do want to go through here now and just kind of play with spacing, figure out what you like, and glue those in place. Not terribly difficult. Maybe you'll need all the ones you made, maybe you didn't. Go ahead and that's a nice, easy little part here where you're now figuring out the balance of that part. Alright, and there you go. You have most of that disc about ready to go. So there is a little like aiming piece on the top here. So this is the widest piece, so this is where that little brick thing holds it is going to be. So this piece is a toothpick and a small bit of cardboard. So we're just going to take one of the scraps of cardboard here and make sure that it's more or less even on all sides, and get a toothpick and glue that in place. I'll be right back with that mostly done. Alright, so I glued that on and bent it nice and firm around it so it's nice and more or less flush. And then we don't need all this distance on each side. We don't need the end of the stick here. So I'm going to cut that a little bit shorter than half on each side, and I'm going to trim it right here. And then I'm going to glue it to what I've determined to be the top of the gun. And so let's just go ahead and trim like so, and like so, and then right snuff with that piece of cardboard on the back side. And again, these are heavy duty craft scissors, so I'm not worried about them not being able to chew through a toothpick. And then so here we just go ahead and remember this large spot is the bottom. So now we just go ahead and put it not quite all the way back at the toothpick part here, or the dental pick part there, and we're just going to glue it on there. So this is, I'm guessing, some sort of targeting piece, so you can triangulate the target. So just like so, and glue that. Okay, so now we've got that more or less ready to go as far as the disc and cannon part. So now we need to work on this part of the base and this like brick thing. So first we're going to need to figure out what we want for this. Now I don't have this same bottle this time, but I do have this bottle. Now this threading is pretty recognizable, so we're going to knock that off. But the rest of this piece I kind of like. So we're going to cut this off, remove this from the rest of the bottle, and from here to here is what we're going to use this time. Now this is a slim fast bottle. You probably could use the mouthpiece off the same bottle we got this from, the juice bottle, or a sports drink or an energy drink, something like that, as long as it's plastic, because metal's a pain in the ass to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that out, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I like this flared piece for the top. So this is going to kind of visually sit on the top of it like that somehow, right? So I'm going to take a piece of scrap cardboard that's more of that food packaging and just glue it to the bottom there. And then trim up all the flashing around it so that there's something to work with and glue to on the bottom of that. So just a little bit of cardboard, like I said, is a place to work on and to glue to. Now, a little bit of foam core board. Now you'll notice that this is trimmed just to be snug in there. However, it doesn't go all the way down. So we're going to go ahead and figure out that depth there, and then we're going to trim it just a little bit. So that depth is a little more than ½ inch. So we're just going to take in about 1/4 inch up about that far, so this goes all the way to the bottom of this collar. It's just a little too far, so we'll just trim a little bit off the bottom. Foam core is cheap. Even if you're spending $5 on a big old piece, you're not using a whole sheet on this little project. Alright, so I'm using this as an example, but of course pull up images on the internet, do your own research on that. So there's about 1/4 inch from the top of the collar to this part here before it starts to taper on each side. So that's a 1/4 inch up, and that's about 1.5 inches from there. Now, of course, these are just rough measurements. So it looks like a total of 1 inch. We'll call that 1.5 inches for the whole distance there. And if you need to trim as you go, that's fine. It's always easier to trim off than add on. So of course, that's the next distance, is from here to here that I'm going to trim, just the one piece. So I'm going to add that 1.5 inches or so from this line where it's at the top of the collar up. Now, on my actual piece here, that is a little too far. So, because I do want that disc more or less sitting on the collar, we can just go ahead and check that. And then just mark it. So, it's about here. And there it is. So if you look at the little grid there, in this case, it's 1 3/4 inches top to bottom, and that is just shy of a 1/2 inch thick. Now, yours might vary a little bit depending upon the bottle you're using. These are all just kind of rough measurements, so go ahead and just work with what you actually have. But you can see that's going to be pretty nice. So now I'm wanting, I think it's at least 2, maybe 3 here. So we're going to cut out a second one and see how that is on thickness. Alright, so it looks like 2 is pretty good. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue these together and then trim up everything around it to match. So ended up realizing you need 3, and then once they're glued together, I just kind of filed the sides to make everything nice and snug. Now, the next part is going to be this angle cut from this front edge here. This is that like rough 1/4 inch here, up to at least halfway through that middle layer. So we're going to want an angle cut through there, and I'm going to do this not with just the regular knife like this, but with a big old one like this, so that I can get the full cut. And then once that's done, again, you kind of just sand to make sure those edges are straight. Okay, so there it is. We have it sanded, cut, and then we're going to take a piece of that food packaging cardboard again, and we're going to put it down. I'm going to trace out the area, and we're going to just make a box that's going to fold up around it. And then this is going to give a better place to glue all this paneling detail to. And I'm going to go ahead and trace that out, and when I come back I'll show you how I did that such that there will be angles and stuff to bend around this piece. Okay, so we're going to score, not cut all the way through, this line, and this line. We're leaving all the rest of this for right now as working material. A lot of it will be trimmed off later, but for right now we want to leave all that in place. So we're going to, again, score from here to here, from this line all the way through to there, and then that line. What that scoring is going to do is it's going to allow a crisper bend, which will give a nicer corner on the finished piece. Okay, so I did have to do a relief cut here so that that part would bend. At this point, we're just going to trim, again, leaving more than you think you need, just so that we have a more reasonable piece to work with. So I'm leaving plenty of material because I don't want to run out on the next steps. Alright, so now I'm going to want to do some more relief cuts. So we're going to want to do a cut along here, straight out, along this corner where this corner meets, straight out, same thing there. And then here, we're going to want to do a straight one this way and this way. Okay. All right, one thing I didn't want to point out here. This piece is going to have this teeny little corner exposed. If that bothers you, just take another piece of scrap cardboard, plug it in there. It doesn't bother me because I feel like it won't be noticeable once the whole thing's together. But that's certainly a step you can do if you like. And there it is, all cladded around that piece. So this, again, is going to be glued in here to support the whole thing, and then this is going to be glued into that collar, right? Now, take this piece and trace out every flat edge. This, and this. Don't worry about this. Don't worry about under there. And remember, a lot of this down here is going to be covered with the collar. So trace that out on some cardboard and then cut those pieces out. Now I've already done that, so here's this piece that'll cover like there. And then we've got this little trapezoid piece that'll cover here. And I've got these little pieces that'll cover here. Now, we're going to go in here and we're actually going to trim just a little bit off of each side. And then we're going to make a couple of arbitrary cuts. Diagonal, maybe, just as an example, it'll be something that will go part way and then a cut and then part way. Just whatever you kind of like. This is for paneling that we're going to then put on the other piece to add some more detail. Now, on the prototype, you see I kept it pretty straightforward. So I'm going to get those base pieces cut. So, trim down, so now they have a little bit of distance all the way around there, right? Well, let's turn that around so you see the contrast. A little bit of distance all the way around there, right? So now, take hole punch. This is a small hole punch. And the other one here that I have cuts these rectangles. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cut a couple of notches to add some interesting detail. We're doing that into each of these pieces. Now we've got a couple of notches in those pieces. We're just going to go ahead and glue those on to that support. Okay, so here's that piece with some of that paneling added in there, a couple of the different things added. I went ahead and did it on all the sides. Now, there's a wonderful video by Adam Savage on how to do sci-fi paneling. It's long, but worth every minute. It's like getting a personal lesson from the man. So, taking another piece of food packaging, and we're going to take the same small hole punch, and we're going to just punch a bunch. Get a bunch of them. You know, you're going to use these here in a minute. Alright, so I got a bunch in that. Here's my rectangular shape one. We're going to get a bunch of those too. And then as well, we're going to take a regular standard hole punch and we're going to get a bunch of those. Okay, so once you have that, kind of dump them into this little thing so you don't lose them. All your pieces from all of the snips so that you have some different shapes and sizes here. And then you take and glue those on top of these panels to add more depth, add more detail. Repeated pattern, things to grab the paint. This is covered in wonderful depth in the video by Adam Savage. Go watch that for more how to do this. It's a wonderful little lesson. I'm going to add those details. Alright, so get your nice little glob of glue on a work surface, a cup, a cap of some sort. Nice sharp new X-Acto blade. Pick up your little piece, just get you a little glue on there. And then we're just going to go ahead and plug it right here. And then I'm going to grab one of the little discs. And we're just going to put it right on top of that one. Just get you a little bit of glue on the back side of it. Come on, glue, hold, do your job. Do your job. Alright. Add a bunch of details on there like that. And then even some of these little rectangles. Same kind of thing. Repeated detail, texture, things to grab paint. I'm going to finish up the rest of this piece. Right back. Alright. Paneled. Little details added, and then this we're just going to go ahead and glue into place there. Now, as I was test fitting it, I come to realize that it didn't fit nice and flat, so I went and added just a little bit of scrap on the back in there so it'll sit there nice and even. And then I'm going to go ahead and glue that in place onto the disc, and then that in place to the collar. Alright, at this point, the next thing is this little like viewfinder is what it looks like when you do your research and see guys standing there staring into it. So I always try to keep a miniature on hand to kind of use to check your scale. Now that little piece in this case is part of a disposable razor. It's this top portion here. Now, of course, just like all the rest of these pieces, you can make this out of foam core and just get that together. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut a chunk of this off and glue that onto the example piece here. Again, it's some sort of little viewfinder or something. There you have that little viewfinder. Now I'm going to just cut a teeny little notch in there so that this can glue in there just a little bit more flush. Just a teeny little notch. So I'm going to cut that out and glue that in place. So one thing about scrap building is sometimes you have to adjust as you go. To get this to sit flat, I did have to trim out more than I had initially expected, but now that sits nice and flush. Alright, so this time I don't have a spare Legion base that's got the little notches in there, but I do have this thing I saved from some packaging that happens to be awfully close to the right size disc wise. So we're just going to use that. It's some sort of extra hard cardboard. You could use a plastic lid from, say, yogurt or something. If need be, you can cut it out of 2 pieces of corrugated cardboard, glue those together crosswise so that they add extra support. So we're going to go ahead and glue this off to the one side, and we're going to glue this over here. Before we do that, we're going to get into the power cabling. Now, I like using old shoelace. Now, part of the thing you can't quite see, there you go, you can see it. All this wonderful little braiding, when painted up, makes a very convincing power cable. So we're going to take a little piece of this, and then a little piece of earbud cord, and we're going to put it into this little grommet, and we're going to leave enough of a length that I can then have it tuck in behind here to imply that it's the power source. So I'm going to get that started. Alright, and it's starting to look like a thing. Alright, so the next piece that I'm going to address is the power box. Now, I've already showed you everything on this power box, how to do that. Here's how we get the grading as far as the frame, building up on a piece of foam core, and the tiling. All of that's exactly the same. So I'm not going to walk you through that absolutely step by step. I've already built that to be able to use here. Now, one little difference here, regular hole punch and a grommet. This is going to be where we have the cable coming from to power the unit. So that piece is more or less the same as other things I've shown you. Okay, so here's the power box with the cables into that grommet. And then, so this, I'm going to glue off the edge over here. And then it's going to have the cables. I left that a little longer than I need. I like to have a little bit like on the ground to cause some intrigue. And I'm going to tuck it into the back of this collar here. So a little bit of that will be trimmed off. So I'm going to go ahead and glue that to the base and glue those in place. Alright, so there it is. Got the main cable going into the collar and then the earphone bud going back here. Now, on my first build, I had this resin little piece. Not everybody's going to have a mold for a little resin piece. So, again, trying to keep this accessible to anybody. This is a little bit of drywall tape. It's not terribly expensive. It can be very handy if you're in the hobby and a grommet. So all I'm doing is making a little like vent. And so we're just going to trim that all up and get that glued on to the back of the new build. And there is that little detail. So now we've got the build more or less done. I'm not going to show you how to paint it. There's plenty of folks that show you how to paint stuff on YouTube. I'm also not going to show you how to do the basing. Again, plenty of people show you how to do that. This is the original that I knocked out as my prototype. And there's my second one. No, maybe not 100% accurate, but as far as on budget, to get on the table, to have as a piece of scenery, a gun emplacement, this is certainly worthwhile. The overall cost on this, I would put it, even if you had to go out and buy every single thing for it, it still shouldn't be more than like $5 absolute tops. Because so much of it is recycled, I would actually estimate this at around $1.50 to $2. And even that I feel might be generous. So there's the two. I am going to go get a quick base coat on this, a nice primer shot, and get you another photo of that. Alright, there is a base coat of primer on it. A couple little spots where it didn't hit. I think there's glue there. For some reason it resisted the paint, but whatever. During the rest of the painting process, that'll all get covered up. But this is an example of how upcycling, you can make some interesting Star Wars stuff, which is definitely in vein of how they did Star Wars originally. So I now have 2 of these cannons, and if you try this, please let me know. I'd love to see it. Comment down below, let me know what you think. Remember, subscribe and bell icon so that you can see all my other builds. Have a great day.